Good morning. I'm Katie Montgomery Mears. I'm one of the pastors on staff at St. Luke's, and I am so glad to be with you for today's devotional. We are in it together. I wanted to start by telling you a funny story, which is that my husband's aunt went to Papua New Guinea about 15 years ago, and when she came back, she said one of the most fascinating things about the trip was listening to folks speak in the local language. So it was a form of Pidgin English. It's called Tok Pisin, and one of the really unique things about that language is that they don't have a lot of words. So where we look at a Webster's dictionary and it's 1,000 pages and we have words for seemingly everything, in Tok Pidgin, which is this Pidgin English, there are fewer words. It's a smaller vocabulary. And so what happens is that the locals have to use many words in order to say one thing sometimes. And so one of the examples that she told us about is to say piano. So instead of being able to say piano, because that's not a word that exists, what they would say is, big fellow has white teeth, has black teeth, you bang on him, he cries out. Which actually is a pretty good description of what happens on the piano, although my apologies already to Thanushka and Sid, because I'm sure they'd disagree with me. But when I was in seminary, I learned that a similar thing happens with Hebrew, but that sometimes it's English that doesn't have enough words for something. Hebrew might describe it perfectly, but we just can't translate it quite correctly. And so some of the stuff in our Bible is just a really good attempt at what the original author's intent was, but it might actually hit on what the intent was. And a good example of that is the word for waiting. And I think this is something that we are in the midst of right now. We are dealing with a lot of waiting and wondering how long things will go on. I know that we all hate to wait. I think the thing that when you mention that you're going to the DMV or that you have to go to the DMV in a group and everyone just groans, the reason is not that people don't like filling out paperwork or going and having a photo taken of themselves. It's because they know that a wait will be a part of it and they don't want to have to deal with that. So one of the things that we could do is to clarify what it means to wait in biblical terms. Hebrew author Matthew Schlemm, who is a professor in the Midwest, says that the root word for waiting and hoping, actually, they share the same root in the Hebrew. And so we know that in biblical terms, when we wait for something, it's tied really closely to the idea of hoping for something. In Genesis 49:18, it says, I will wait on your salvation. I think a closer transliteration of that would be, I will hope for your salvation. And incidentally, the word for cord is also a word that shares the same root with wait and with hope. And so there's this idea that we are tied with a cord, an invisible cord, but one that drives us when we are waiting or hoping for something. Because we don't just wait in vain, we wait with hope and with anticipation of a God that will set everything right. And so what we do is we tie ourselves with this cord to God. In Proverbs, in chapter 10, it says that the hopes of the righteous will lead to joy, but the hopes of the wicked will perish. And so we know that everybody ties themselves to something. We all have a cord tying us to something. Right now, even now, we're tying our cords to the government, to the news media, to what doctors are saying, to our bosses and our jobs. We're tying our cords to so many things, but what we need to be doing as we wait on our next steps is tying our cords to God. We need to be thinking about everything we do in terms of tying ourselves to the God who is faithful. Biblical hope is not just this blind optimism. It's not a blind faith. It's actually about trust. And so what we do in this time as we hope and wait and look forward with anticipation of what is to come, even though we don't know what it is right now, we can't even imagine it, we tie our cord to the God who is faithful, to the God who we know will set everything right, to the God who is bigger than us. And then we hope for a future that is greater than we can even imagine. So I hope you'll join me in doing that today, that as you think about how long, oh Lord, and how long will this last, and all of the things that you're waiting for, whether it's to go back to work or a package to get delivered in the mail or for schools to open, that you will wait with hope and that you will tie yourself knowing that God is greater than all of these things, and so tie yourself to God.